CBS News.
It's Saturday, baby.
Welcome back to another Ask a DM. Tonight I got Dylan and Joshua.
Hello.
Tonight's question, guys: how do I scale combats?
Good question.
It is.
Something I've done incorrectly multiple times.
Every DM has done incorrectly at some point. Otherwise, you overkill or you underkill. Getting that perfect dynamic, well, it's like lightning in a bottle. It happens once. And then you always chase it again.
Well, so for starters, different systems and different types of games are going to have different ways to scale
Of course.
their creatures. I think since because of the popularity of 5e, I think we should kind of focus our
Attention on 5e.
Yeah, keep it general, but 5e in mind at least.
Yeah. Kind of like calibrate our answers towards 5th edition.
Mm-hmm.
So to start, really you need to figure out why are you adjusting the encounter. So for those of you who don't know how to calculate an encounter, usually the mechanic is that a creature will come with a challenge rating, and then multiple creatures or different types of creatures of the same challenge rating will synergize together to increase the challenge rating by 1.
Yeah.
I think depending on the system, it may also go up by 2. And then there may be other things that modify the creature, like templates or stats or class levels. So for example, if I have a CR5 Displacer Beast and I have a CR5 Troll in the same encounter, that's actually a CR7 or a CR6 for the entire encounter.
Okay.
But basically, what you want to do is start with total number of creatures should be usually like total number of players in your party plus 3 or 4.
Okay.
So let's say and also keep in mind that in order to do this, you also need to accurately know what your party's challenge rating is. And a good encounter will usually be within 2 or 3 points of an equal challenge rating. So hypothetically, let's say you calculate your party to be a CR8.
Yeah.
A good encounter will also be a CR8, 9, or 10. 11 will be pushing it. 7, 6, and 5 will feel very easy and not really consume a whole lot of resources.
Generally. Now,
Generally.
some stat blocks are very, what's the word, deceiving? Yeah, we'll go with that.
So there is a reason for that. And we had talked about this in a previous video. We touched on it briefly in a previous video, which is the Open Gaming License, which allows for third-party developers to create content and use the name Dungeons & Dragons and the contents of the standard rules document to publish content. So let's say, hypothetically, I'm a third-party developer and I want to make a monster, and I miscalculate or do not accurately calculate the CR of a monster. Well, that now shines poorly upon the CR system.
Yeah.
Because in my published content, I'm going to have something that isn't reflecting accurately using the mechanics.
Well, actually,
but it is considered published material.
I was referring more to scouts at level 1 and 5e, because they have multi-attack, both melee and range, and their example being a basilisk fight.
Yeah.
If you don't have ways to prevent or stop or undo petrification, even though it has a low CR, it's now just skyrocketed because of how deadly the encounter can become.
That might be a good thing to bring up. How do you actually get the CR of an individual monster then?
That is usually, if you're making a new monster, you're going to assign it more or less arbitrarily. And there are some formulas online, and there are some formulas in older editions used for creating your own monster. And basically what you're going to do is use a formula that includes how many hit die it has as a base number minus 1. So if I have a creature with 8 hit die, it's a CR7. Okay. If I'm adding any templates to that, each type of template will adjust the CR appropriately. Usually the fire template adjusts too. Briefly, fire template is usually from or descended from plane of fire, immune to fire damage, maybe vulnerability to cold, or maybe also immune to cold,
And
depending
also
on
may
how hot the
cause
creature is.
fire damage if you hit it sometimes.
Ambient
or
fire
be
damage
close.
or an aura. And then also subjective to burning materials. So like a grapple attempt or some kind of physical contact may ignite anything you're wearing. It may also destroy consumables. So like if you have a potion bandolier and the potion bandolier catches, the creature could have a system or a mechanic in place to just de facto destroy non-magical, mundane outerwear. Okay? So so we've taken our 8-hit die, CR7. We're going to slap the fire template onto it. That's going to make it a CR9. And then out of the rule book, if you're taking any other kind of like quasi ability, supernatural ability, or special ability, depending on how powerful they are, you're also going to adjust the challenge rating of the monster. So in this case, the Basilisk, probably just adjustment of 1, because Petrification Sight is nasty, but not the end of the world.
Yeah, well, it depends on the resources too. And
Well, it depends on the creativity of the party.
yes.
And it depends on the party's ability to understand that they're not prepared for that fight and to come back another day.
Yeah, and using spells like Obscuring Mist, which I think I've used against a Basilisk before.
Yep,
is a
Obscuring
great-
Mist,
Yeah.
Darkness,
Easy level
and
spell.
those are all low level.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's only a 2nd level
Yeah.
spell.
So if the
Depends, but
supernatural ability or the ability or the special ability of the monster is easily counterable, I would maybe do a 1 adjustment or maybe even a none adjustment to the CR, depending on how easy it is to counter. So for example, in like Dragon's Breath Weapon, every dragon has a breath weapon.
Yeah.
And then depending on the type of dragon, it's usually either a cone or a line.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is an innate like supernatural ability embedded in the creature. I would say that the breath weapon is a static adjustment regardless of the age type. So because dragons just have a breath weapon, there's going to be a miscellaneous 1 or 2 calculated into the CR of a baby dragon, and it's the same miscellaneous 1 or 2 calculated into the CR of an ancient dragon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
'Cause it's the
complete
same
sense.
ability.
Yeah, because what I'm getting is that, and to kind of take away some more technical terminology, but you're basically assessing how much damage or what the creatures can do that would affect the party's resource of, say, hit points. And that can, like with an area effect with a breath weapon, because it could be a cone or a line, it could hit multiple party members at once and do little damage if the dice rolls are in their favor, or a lot of damage if they're not.
Yeah.
Or even just the average damage can still hurt, that, and it hits everyone at once.
Yeah.
That would increase it more because of it
Well,
can do more
Yes.
with the same attack.
Now, what you don't want to do
Mhm.
is have synergizing components adjust CR. So if they happen to synergize, that should be kind of like a de facto downside of facing one of these monsters, and I'll continue to use the dragon as an example.
Especially in
Most
Slayer.
dragons are spellcasters at high levels. So if the dragon casts an entangle or a black tentacles, and it starts to cause you to take disadvantage on your dexterity
saves.
saving throw, and then breath weapons you,
Ooh, yeah.
that should just be something that the dragon knows to do as its preferred fighting tactic. You're not going to take that synergy into consideration when calculating CR.
Because normally they're intelligent creatures.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
like any characters using each other to synergize against a, let's say again, a
Team
dragon.
tactics.
Yes,
Yeah.
team tactics. So that's a great way to get the base CR of a creature you're creating. So just to summarize that real quick, you're going to start total number of hit die in the creature -1. Adjust for templates and special abilities. Most pre-generated templates will have a static adjustment, and then special abilities probably going to be a miscellaneous / de facto ±1, 2, or 3. Not all 3 of them combined.
Yeah.
And you're going to be more or less getting that number by taking a comparison creature. So like if I wanted to hybridize a basilisk and a manticore to create a new type of creature that had both manticore venom and basilisk gaze, I should be taking more or less like I have a +1 CR because of the manticore venom and a +1 CR from the basilisk gaze. I'm not counting that as a +3 because a paralytic venom on top of a reflex to avoid petrification or whatever it may be happen to synergize.
Yeah.
And you're creating the terrifying Mantalisk now.
Yes, or Basicore.
Oh, that's cool. Too.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
Now, when making any kind of world or quest or campaign, sometimes you want to use like a lower level monster for something cool happening. Like let's say, I think actually a question on one of your panels was they wanted to use a wow, I cannot remember the name.
Like a young something.
Yeah, like a hellhound. There we go.
Yeah.
Like they want to use a hellhound, but its CR is lower than the party it is going to fight. So how would I scale that
Be a
hellhound
curbstone
up?
for the party based on its standard stat block, basically.
Okay. Excellent question. This actually comes up quite a lot, especially when you get into late game content and early game content, when you want cool, dynamic, thematic monsters. Yeah. When the party isn't really suited for engaging them at their standard challenge rating. So to start, we're just going to talk about general adjustments, and then we'll give a plus example and a minus example for going up and down, respectively. Okay. So for just kind of like a general overview. As the Dungeon Master, you have to recognize that under Rule 0, and just like your de facto authority, you have the ability to adjust the stats on anything you want, however you want.
Yeah.
It's actually developing the skill to get that adjustment to where it is a challenge for the party, and not a cakewalk for the party, and also not killing the party. Yeah. That takes practice, and that's where experience in being a Dungeon Master really pays off. So to start. If you're questioning if you can even do it, the answer is yes. You as the Dungeon Master have the authority to adjust the stat blocks, challenge ratings, abilities, class levels, all that kind of stuff of every single monster in the game. All right? Don't let anybody tell you don't, because that would be incorrect. Just go ahead.
Right. When you do that, though, should you flavor text the monster like a wounded, like if you're fighting a dragon at a lower level, should you be like a wounded dragon or like a sick dragon?
Yes. Cursed, sick, young.
A good way to alert the players that something's different.
Yes. I would say if you were running with a newer block of players, then tell them up front that those are some things that they notice. If they make the appropriate skill check to identify the creature.
Of recalling it.
Right, so everybody, I think across all systems, Arcana or Knowledge Arcana is the skill associated with identifying dragons and their capabilities. So if someone in the party took the time to roll the Arcana check to actually examine the creature and start to gather information from it, then you would reward them with, this one seems different, like it's being hindered in such a way, X, Y, and Z, or it's being bolstered in such a way, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Then they would take that as a player, spread that information across the party via tactics, communicating at the table, using spells, however, and then they need to adjust their tactics accordingly. It was the mark of an inexperienced player to not be doing those things. So, as a side point to that, if you want your players to start making those kinds of checks and to start doing that like in-combat research and analysis of what's happening, force a few rolls. And then
you can make this roll to see that.
Exactly. Like if somebody's, and this also really works if somebody's going through analysis paralysis, not really sure what to do on their turn.
Show them the opportunity of what you can.
Yeah, regardless of your class, like you've heard of the legends of dragons, because we keep coming back to this example. Like roll this check as a
Dungeons and Dragons.
Exactly. Yeah. Like roll this check as a free action to learn something, and then based off what you learn, that may help them think through what they're trying to do. All right. Let's go back. We've sidetracked a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
So you have the authority to adjust stat blocks.
Yes.
And they can be for empowerment or it can be to debuff.
Yes.
You have a lot of tools in your repertoire as a dungeon master to do this. We're going to start with going up. Because there's usually one that happens in my opinion
like the Hellhound example. Exactly. I want to use some Hellhounds in these fights, but these guys are way above a Hellhound's capability. Yes. How do I make it relevant?
Exactly. So there is a distribution bell curve of all creatures to reflect their power level. So if you were to take a graph of how strong every single Hellhound is in the entire game and plot it, it would form a bell curve.
Sure.
And so the theory behind this is that as you move up in CR and as you beef up the Hellhound, you're pulling from creatures more to the right of the bell curve. And when you debuff them or you make them weaker, you pull from creatures more to the left of the bell curve. Although they're all Hellhounds in their own way. It's the exact same premise of if I were to take every dwarf and I was to plot their effective challenge rating in CR across a single stat block, there would be dwarves in the center of the bell curve, which are probably maybe 1-2 hit die or maybe 1 class level dwarf. with the extremes being like, this is a some kind of doesn't even have a name tag dwarf versus the dwarf lord with multiple class levels, right? So adjusting where you're pulling from the bell curve is the first part. The way you actually do that is you can add hit dice, right? That's a great way to adjust.
Popular way.
Yeah,
just give them more hit points.
Just beef them.
It's not just that. That is a very common misconception.
Yes.
When you add hit die to a creature, other things go up as well, like size category, which would also affect their reach. Also, a lot of saving throws based off of their special ability to set the DCs based off their hit die. So, like, if, let's say a dragon, the DC of its breath weapon is going to be based off of how many hit die it's has, and possibly modified by its constitution or charisma score, depending on the edition. Right, so the larger the dragon, the older the dragon, the more devastating its breath weapon is going to be, the harder it is to avoid.
So for monsters, are hit die kind of like its own level system?
Yes. This is something every dungeon master and probably every player should know, is hit dice and class level are not the same thing, but they're similar. Every class level you take also rewards a hit die, but however, hit die is its own unit of measurement. So in this case, let's say you were multi-classing.
Yeah.
I have 4 levels of paladin and 4 levels of bard, because those are both charisma-based characters for whatever reason.
Yeah.
All right. In total, you have 4 levels of paladin and 4 levels of bard, but you have 8 hit dice.
Yes.
Right. It's your total number of hit dice accumulated to you. 4 of those hit dice are D10s. And the other 4 are D6s or D8s. I forget.
I forget what bards are.
But it's 4 to reflect the hit die that you gain from paladin, 4 to reflect the hit die that you gain from bard. All right. Your total hit dice pool is 8, and then that's actually going to determine your total number of hit points, which is a separate pool, which is something that you roll as a character. Okay. So let's get back to our example about scaling, right? So with my Hellhound, let's say I don't know the Hellhound stat block from memory. Let's just say they have 5 hit die. Right, they have, most monsters usually run either a D10 or a D12 hit points. We'll say the average of a D12 is 6, so let's say Hellhound is like 33 hit points depending on its constitution mod. Okay, so let's say something as a stat block that you're adding to the Hellhound is you want them to be immune to cold damage, right? So normally, since they're Hellhounds, they're immune to fire. And I think they're vulnerable to cold, because as you douse the fire, they take additional damage. However, as the dungeon master, you could institute a ruling that these specific hellhounds are so ferocious and so hot that their cores actually negate all ice damage as it encloses. Almost acts like as a dispelling agent. Like, there is no mortal magic that could douse these flames.
You have to go to the plane of ice itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, so as you up the hit dice of the creature, you can give it additional special abilities. Or if you want to keep its hit points static, you could also just adjust some of its special abilities. Like if it has an aura of fire damage that does 2d4, you could up it to maybe 3d4 or 4d4 to make it even hotter, right? Or you could change, rather than adding more dice to the pool, you could increase the cap in the maximum amount of damage by upping the type of damage die. You can go from d4s to d6s. So instead of doing 2d4, it now does 2d6, right? So it has the potential to do more, but it keeps the same minimum.
Okay.
All right. So these are some things that you can do to adjust the monster.
Yeah, I'm actually looking. I pulled up the 5e Hellhound, and one of the standard things to get actually is pack tactics. So you could actually have a pack of Hellhounds to increase the threat for a higher level party.
Yeah.
Because they also get apparently a fire breath. Granted, it's a very low save, and it's only 66 fire damage every half.
All right, but like, what's the DC on the save?
12.
That's nothing. Like, that is a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's
you're assessing from a good party.
Yeah.
That's an easy save to make.
Yeah. What is it? Dexterity based?
Yeah, it's a dexterity save.
It's a dex save. So something I would not do.
Challenge rating 3 for these.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't that far off.
Yeah.
So something I would not do is change the attribute rolling the save. So like if you have a breath weapon that's targeting a dexterity or reflex,
it's still dexterity.
Keep it dexterity or reflex. Yeah. The game mechanics get really wonky when you start adjusting how breath weapons work. And that also mainly comes down to like the way evasion works, mainly in 3.5 in Pathfinder. But
to an extent 5e as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But like, I wouldn't have you hit their breath weapons now start targeting wisdom. Like, it's not a wisdom saving throw,
Yeah.
right? That wouldn't make sense. But something you could do is have there be like noxious fumes in their breath weapon and add a saving throw. So you have a dexterity saving throw to deal fire damage, and then if they fail, they also have to make a wisdom saving throw and have some kind of mental effect come in where
Like
they're
the
confused.
afterburn.
Yeah, an afterburn. Yeah,
Like a
literally
brimstone
just
breath
spit up
instead
from the
of
dog.
fire breath.
Yeah,
And you could even describe that so that comes with the altering and the narrative. Like, it's bigger, and the breath also has like this smoke and ash around it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think as a DM, the biggest part of scaling up a monster is conveying to your parents, conveying to your players that they you have scaled this monster.
Something's
up the
different.
way.
Yeah. So again, as the dungeon master, you should be encouraging that.
Yes.
But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's your responsibility to always disclose that information.
Yeah.
Right? In my opinion, that leads to just hack and slash combating. Where it's like, you know exactly what this creature does, you know its stat block, you know, like,
Just
everybody
go.
knows immediately how to counter
Hit it.
Just hit it and beat it to its, until it's unconscious. Right? You should be keeping the players on their toes by having new and unusual things coming out of the monster manual, right? Like, greatest example I can think of, magma monsters, rust monsters with a fire template.
That was that we definitely got a little scared there.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah,
scared.
I think we're all like, oh wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. But you could also think of like, and that was literally just me adding the fire template to rust monsters.
Yeah.
Right. And something else you could do is like you could change it so that there's one for every elemental type. Like,
Of course,
you could have acid monsters where they're rust monsters that are also immune to acid damage.
Or they're dripping like just constantly.
Like there's all kinds of stuff you can do.
I think that last fight you did was a great example of both upscaling monsters and downscaling, because we had the magma monsters
Who were upscaled and the dragon who was downscaled.
Because he was
lobotomized dragon
lobotomized
who
because of
cannot
the contraptions, so all his spell casting was gone.
Yes.
And for an ancient red dragon, especially in Pathfinder or 3.5,
Huge
you're talking limited wish,
Yep.
displacement spell where there's a 50% chance you just miss.
Yep. Displacement, stone
haste.
skin. Yep.
Hold monster, I think.
Yeah.
So it could have been a very different fight, and you scaled it down by saying, look, all that's off the table.
Well,
it still has its natural abilities.
Yeah.
But it still has it's a dragon, so breath attacks, it's raw strength, it's
or a fear, all that kind of stuff.
Or a fear, or in that earlier edition stuff with spell resistance, which it's not the same in 5e. It's a very different thing. But
I do gotta say that was a very good fight. And when you're doing scaling up monsters and scaling down monsters, do you take into effect the overall equation of the CR for both?
Yes. So, excellent question. What you should do is, after you've adjusted all your monsters and you have their final CR estimated, that's when you do the final encounter challenge rating calculation, which is where you take creatures of the same challenge rating and add them together in order to increase their overall challenge rating. So, like I was saying, 2 CR5s come together to make a CR6. 3 CR5s come together to make a CR 6.5. Right, because 2 of them would join together to create a 6, and then you have that half of a 1 left over. 4 CR5s would come together to make a CR7, because 2 of them would pair up in a pyramid style to create 2 CR6s, and then those 2 CR6s would join together to make 1 CR7.
And that's not even accounting for combination of creatures that actually synergize.
Correct.
Like a different channel I watched at one point, they joked about buddy monsters, where it was a dungeon, and there was a clay golem that would grab the player and would walk over to a pit area that you couldn't see anything because it was full of gelatinous cubes.
Yeah.
And it would just drop in, but because it heals from the acid damage, the players are stuck while they're just taking all this acid, and the golem's like,
I'm healing and
Next.
killing you at the same time.
Now, you said earlier that adding this ideas of synergy, you don't add that to CR, but in that example,
in that example,
would you?
How high would that actually increase the CR in that case if you had that situation?
It
as
would.
an example. It wouldn't.
So tactics
I don't
themselves-
add tactics or synergy to CR.
Fair enough.
So intelligence on the monster's part isn't something that you add to the CR of itself. It's more the character's ability to deal with that kind of tactic.
Yeah, and the main reason for this is, you don't add party synergy when you calculate your party's challenge rating. So like.
Because how well they use it's on the
Exactly.
party.
How well they use it is on the party, and there's no mathematical way to estimate that.
It'd be like chess. There's just too many combinations.
Exactly. Right. So like on the flip side, like any rule that you invoke against your players or for your players, you're also effectively obligated to use for your monsters. So Chris Cox, my favorite dungeon master, the guy who effectively honed my DMing skills, he always ruled that if your party table talks, the monsters can table talk. Where like if especially if they're in a big room, right? Like if they're in this giant field covering hundreds of feet, and they're just casually giving each other orders like they're sitting next to each other, then the monsters can do that too.
Yeah.
Right,
interpret it as like they're talking out loud.
Exactly, interpret it like they're or shouting, right? Because unless
Attack
they're
from the
using
left.
like message, sending, some kind of telepathic link, exactly, telepathic bond.
Yeah.
Like unless there's an actual mechanic that allows them to do that, you'll never be able to nip that metagaming in the bud.
But then you can embrace and use it.
But you have to embrace and use it.
But like you said, both sides get it.
Yep.
For balance.
Yep, for balance sake. So if I have a swarm of goblins all spread out within that, pasture, valley, forest, wherever they may be, they're going to be able to communicate just like the party's communicating.
By telephone, essentially.
Effectively by telephone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Throat link.
I mean, we've covered upscaling and to an extent downscaling as well. Is there any final points on downscaling that you want to make or anything? Or do you got ideas of?
So
aside from just stripping away abilities or turning him into a minion from 4th edition, like we discussed in a prior question.
Well, so you effectively just do the opposite and shift to the opposite end of the bell curve when you adjust down. So as you pull hit die away, their hit point total will go down.
Of course.
Natural armor is also kind of like a reflection of hit die, right? So if the creature has any natural armor, you might do like for every 2 hit die pulled, 1 natural armor comes off. You can also, as their hit die come down, their ability to pull feats, if the monsters have any feats, will be restricted as well. So just like players have the option to take an ability score improvement or a feat every 4 levels in 5th edition, there's a similar mechanic that gives monsters special abilities and feats. And so as you strip away multiple hit die, you should be stripping away the bottom or the most recently taken ability, feat, or feature that the monster has to represent that they're in some kind of stage where they lack the skill or proficiency to do those
They
types
haven't
of
acquired
things.
it yet. So like a young version, or cursed, or weakened, or poisoned, or something like that.
Well,
like it's lost, it can't do that yet. Or it can't do it right now.
Or it just never learned how.
Or it didn't learn how. Maybe it could be something, like, thematically, they didn't learn this trick, they learned, like, I know there's like variants in other editions of creatures. Like normally trolls are commonly fire and acid stops the regeneration.
Yeah.
I've seen, I think in Pathfinder, there's actually different version of trolls that fire and acid doesn't bother them. But other damage types do stop the regeneration.
Yeah, the crystalline troll is by far like one of the scariest things that Pathfinder came out because sonic damage isn't very common. And it's not really it's not like prepped a whole lot, and so like the sonic damage is what stops their regeneration, and because they're also a crystalline creature, like
they take even more.
They take more, from the sonic damage, but they're immune to like damn near everything, like fire, acid, cold, electric.
When you do hit them, it really hurts.
Yeah. But exactly like that. You take different types of templates, different types of combinations, bring them together, and create cool monsters. If you want to make new monsters, a great place to look is old, just human mythology. That's where we get a lot of our inspiration. A lot of traditional Dungeons and Dragons monster actually comes out of like Germanic folklore and like Polish folklore from Europe, right?
I will say the biggest mind blow I've had for D&D wise was learning that Tiamat was an ancient Babylonian goddess.
Yeah.
completely caught me by the side. I was like just researching Babylonia,
Yeah.
and I just read Tiamat. I'm like, wait, hold on, hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, I learned about Bahamut and Tiamat from Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's where I first came. I didn't look into the lore at that point. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that's neat.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of stuff that is derived from ancient mythology and that kind of stuff. So that would be a great place to look if you want to like start making new monsters.
New monster stuff.
Yeah. And I do think we should cover that in the homebrew.
Yes.
Yeah, that's something right up in the homebrew question. But yeah, I think excellent points on and a good guidance of upscaling and downscaling and a way to assess. And yeah, definitely good. Excellent talk, guys.
Yeah. One thing before we go though, I just want to touch on calculating your party's CR because we haven't really done that yet.
That is how in depth is that though?
Well, just real quick. It's gonna follow the same rules as calculating the CR of like monsters and stuff. So let's say I have 4 level 5 adventurers in my party. Their base CR is going to be a 7, right? Because of what we've talked about. You know, 2 of them combined, the 4 of them combined to make 2 6s. The 2 6s combined to make a 7. The other thing you have to adjust for with your party though is actually money and how much magical equipment they have.
Yes,
there is
just everything.
Yeah, there is no set way to do this, and it was actually one of the drawbacks from 4th edition. 4th edition, when you moved into Paragon and when you moved from Paragon into Epic tier, there was actually established in the change of challenge rating that you were expected to have so much gold worth of loot about your character.
Wealth based per level.
You were meant to have a certain amount of wealth.
Yeah.
Well,
and it was up to you.
Survived that long, you're obviously going to be doing things that get you that.
The system was designed that you
like
were supposed to have it.
Yeah.
While 5e they took a very different design of. They focus more on what the classes can do.
Exactly.
Even though they're still like, but you still need these, but...
Right, but like, it's much easier to run a magic neutral game in 5e than 4th edition. Like, it's impossible to do in 4th edition almost.
It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
You're redoing a lot of math.
And so, a great way to actually adjust this for 5th edition is you're limited to how many items you can have attuned to you.
Yes.
And so, what I would recommend is for every attunement slot that every character has, increase the CR of the party by 1. So let's go back to that example of 4. Let's say of those 4 level 5 adventurers, everyone has at least 1 attunement slot filled. That party is going to move from a 7 to an 8. And if they have all of their second attunement slots filled, they're going to move from an 8 to a 9. But let's say only 2 of them have their third attunement, the party stays at a 9.
Yeah, most attunement items they enhance your character otherwise defensively or offensively, but a lot of times it's have more offensive capabilities.
Yeah, but the main reason
you're more accurate.
Exactly. Yeah, the main reason I base it in 5th edition at least off of how many items you have attuned to you is because they limited those number of slots. Yeah. And there is kind of like an expected, everyone should have at least, a +1 armor by level 10, right? Like there are certain milestones with factored into the bounded accuracy and the truncating of the magic item list that, I don't know, in my opinion.
They should have at least 1 attuned item by that point, if not 2.
Exactly. But it's just kind of like a standard metric available across all classes. But I just wanted to touch on that before we have to wait, because knowing your party's challenge rating is key to calculating what they should be fighting at.
As well as, granted, 5th edition not so much concerned with multiple attacks and such, because by 5th level, usually everyone has something they can attack multiple creatures.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely excellent points. Thanks for joining us tonight, Joshua and Dylan.
Awesome.
Look forward to the next question.
Yep. If you like this content, be sure to check out froggodgames.com. I know we talked about mostly 5th edition tonight, but they do have a system-neutral campaign setting called the World of the Lost Lands. That is what the Sword of Air campaign takes place in. If you like that, you make sure to check us out on YouTube for our campaign, the Sword of Air.
Yeah, where you implement a lot of this stuff.
A lot of this stuff.
We did give a lot of examples from our own quests.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Until next time.